Guys, this is another video on CSGO from RGT. As you might already know, I've been covering it quite a bit, particularly the various weapons, fire patterns and various other things, and in this video I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be just using stock footage that I've already recorded, and I'm just going to be kind of going over my initial thoughts of the game so far. Bear in mind that it's still in beta. Not all of the stuff is implemented yet, and that definitely includes all the maps. One of my favourite maps, I've mentioned this a couple of times, is actually Aztec. It's not one of the more balanced maps, but balance doesn't always equal fun, as we all know. Anyway, more to the point, enough of my ramblings. I'm going to actually just talk a little bit about the game itself. Now, for those of you who don't know what Counter-Strike is, and if you do, then, feel free to skip maybe a minute or two ahead. The game has always been about basically two teams, one counter-terrorists and one terrorist, with opposing goals. So, for example, with the CTs, the goal would be to either rescue the hostages or defuse the bomb, for example. With the terrorists, the reverse would be true. So you want to, keep the terrorists. Sorry, you want to keep the hostages, or plant the bomb and have it detonate successfully. Obviously. Anyway, moving on to CS:GO. This has been somewhat changed. Those goals are still there, depending upon the map, obviously, but now there's other modes as well, which are now starting to almost take on a more modern warfare or, COD kind of approach, and that you just jump straight into the action. Now, that's not to say it's for comparison to, say, COD. That would be, foolhardy. It's definitely got its own merits, however, where you earn weapons, and I think the mode's actually quite fun. So far, I'm not 100% sure, perhaps someone could elaborate on the comments, maybe, if all the maps are going to be available in, say, Demolition as what they are in regular, classic mode, shall we call it, or whether they're going to have their own separate maps each. Either way, I'm actually really liking the exclusive map so far for Demolition. It's quite nice, and to be honest, Demolition, the only thing I'm a bit unsure about at the moment is the weapons progression. At the moment, it's not particularly balanced, and for example, you start off with, say, an M4A1 if you're the CT, and then you might be given something like, a P90, which it's not exactly progression if you've managed to kill a couple of people. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there, although to be honest I haven't played that much of Demolition mode. But I do quite like what I have played, and I do think it's quite fun. I also think it's quite different and quite a good way to get people into CS. Because CS is one of those games where it's very frustrating, particularly if you're a newbie. One of those reasons is because, obviously, the damage that you take in the game is very high. For example, in certain games, you can withstand getting shot in the face a few times. On CS, this is not the case, particularly as in classic ones, you are not given armour. So, in other words, you get shot, and you're most likely going to die, even to something simple like a USP in the face, at let's say a medium-ish range. You're probably going to, die after one or two hits. In fact, one of the famous animations in CS is that you hear when you get shot in the head and you've just about managed to survive. I don't know if you heard the gook there, but let's hope you did. And it's, just kind of letting you know that you might not want to stand around too much longer, because another one of those, Sonny Jim, and you're going to be dead. And of course, certain weapons are going to pretty much take you out instantly. For example, the AWP, however you want to pronounce it. There's two different variations. I won't go into the backstory of that. Anyway, other weapons, however, such as the AK-47, are also notorious for being able to take you out, and this is definitely not changed in CSGO, and I, for one, am happy about this. Now, some people are arguing that the AK-47 in particular is a little bit too strong, and I'm somewhat inclined to agree. The burst fire on it is pretty accurate, even at long range, and to be honest with you, it does do a lot of damage, even if you have armour. But the other weapons, such as the AUG, are also pretty damn accurate, and they've also got a zoom. Now, the zoom, I actually really like it. The zoom on the previous CS, for example, 1.6, was somewhat lackluster for the Bullep or the Steerhawk, for example, the SG552. You'd right click, and rather than it actually being a scope, as you all know, the field of view would just simply zoom in a little bit. So, in other words, it just got you, a few percent basically closer to the action, which was, to be honest with you, lousy. This is no longer the case. You're, given a proper scope that you can look down. It's not quite as magnified as, say, the Orm or the Scout if you, fully zoom in. However, it's still there. And somewhat interestingly, the shots are actually extremely accurate. And I've actually done some weapons tests on this, and you could see that, even at relatively decent fire rate, I'm not talking burst fire here, as in like holding down the button, I'm talking, 1 or 2 shot bursts. It pretty much is going to hit on a dime. That's going to be very, very interesting. Now, at the moment, I'm not just going to be talking so much about weapon balance, because a lot of this is still up in the air. However, I am more referring to the gameplay modes, the changes, and what I do and do not like. The weapons wheel, as I personally call it, the new buy menu, in other words, is actually a really nice addition. I personally love the fact that it actually gives you stats on the weapons, which is not particularly great for, say, someone who's a veteran, particularly on weapons that are well known. For example, let's just say the Scout. But for those of us who are new to the game, or those of us who, just want to for comparison, it's quite nice. And I also quite like some of the new innovations, such as, let's just say, the Molotov cocktail, which does a fairly good job of locking down certain areas. Obviously, no one wants to stand in fire. If you've ever played World of Warcraft, you'll know that that's a pretty good golden rule right there. Overall, I'm really enjoying the game. I very much like the overhaul of the graphics. There are a few areas and a few things that you cannot do in this. I'll give you an example, is Italy. There were certain overhangs and ledges and so forth that you could be able to jump up on, even if you're basically just on your own. And this is no longer the case, although that might change. Of course, it is a beta, as I've mentioned a million times now, ad nauseum. But this is no longer the case in this particular build. You cannot, for example, get onto particular overhangs. I do quite like that aspect of CS 1.6, and I am hoping it's going to be back in. Some of the tactics weren't particularly useful, but they were still fun, and I felt they added a bit of variety to the game. And if someone managed to somehow get up there, particularly in the rapid speed and time, then, you kind of respected them for it. Some of the jumps were pretty tricky, particularly if you weren't used to them. If you hadn't played a map for a couple of, months or something, because, you were out of practice or what have you, then you're most likely going to fall on your ass a few times when you're trying them. At least that was for me. I found that if I didn't play CS for a while, I became horribly out of practice. That was just my personal experiences, however. So I'm really enjoying the beta, and I'm very much looking forward to the full game on its release. Overall, I have no particular complaints over the game. I think, considering it's the beta, I don't want to start talking too much about balance, as I've said. I have some concerns, for example, the AK-47. But overall, I'm really liking it. I also quite like, for example, that you can choose the different television type or screen type that you're on, which is basically FOV, effectively. It's quite nice, and obviously you've got pretty great control over your bindings and so forth, and you still get access to the console, which is great. That means that you'll still be able to do certain levels of scripting, I imagine. Obviously, a lot of this is going to start coming out in the wash later on, when pros actually get handled the handles, shall I say, on the final build. I'm pretty sure there's going to be some awesome stuff that comes out, and of course modifications. The original the original Counter-Strike, which eventually went to 1.6 and hasn't moved on from version number anyway since then. The original is pretty much a modification of the original Half-Life engine. Now, there has been quite a lot of mods, of course, for Counter-Strike itself. And I'm not particularly keen on most of them, to be honest. Some of them add in, say, Warcraft kind of qualities where you can, basically level up, for example. And it's all okay and not bad. I'm not particularly a big fan of it. I even played I believe a Resident Evil mod back in the day, which was actually pretty cool. It allows you to recreate some of the Resident Evil 1 mansion. It was pretty awesome. Although I'm personally not into those type of mods, but it will be interesting to see what people get hold of. It was actually quite nice because some of the maps, the aim maps for example, were pretty great for improving your, aiming, obviously. And some of the maps that I played on were pretty inventive. And obviously because the weapons were littered on the floor, you could, basically your team was irrelevant. It didn't matter if you were C, P or P. So I'm really looking forward to see what the modding community does on that. Particularly on the console. They haven't really announced what's going to be happening on there. I'm imagining that certain maps will be available via DLC, which I assume is going to be paid content. However, to be fair to Valve, they are actually one of the few companies that I can say I'm actually really happy with their DLC product. They always provide free content for the games, usually. I mean, look at Left 4 Dead, it's still getting updates. I'm not a massive Left 4 Dead player, but even so. And, for example, CS Source and even, Condition Zero and 1.6, they've all had quite a lot of updates, even so, even though they're fairly old games now. Valve are still happy to implement achievements. For example, achievements were added in Source. I'm not really saying anything new to play, a lot of you guys. However, I just want to, somewhat ramble here, and, give you a little bit of food for thought. Anyway, my overall impressions so far are fairly positive of the game. I very much like CS. I got out of it for a long time, to be honest with you. I stopped playing for several years, mostly because I started to play World of Warcraft and some other games. I became very much into fighting games for a while, and then I started to play some other games, and to be honest with you, CS was left by the wayside, so compared to some of you guys, I haven't been playing for a long time, and so obviously my skills are somewhat diminished. However, I will start to produce more match videos for you, as I know that they're very popular. Similarly, I know that some of you have requested certain things, certain examples. I will say that if you have something you want me to demonstrate, it's often best if you message me directly. There's actually 2 of us that run the channel, but any CS stuff Marta will ignore and just, smack me over the head with it if I, have fallen behind because of work or so. So if I have fallen behind because of work or whatever, she'll, let me know. However, if you do want me to show something specific, then please do let me know. If it's a map that already exists, for example, let's just say Dust, I'll use a classic example, then please try to incorporate a screenshot if it's something very specific that you want me to show. For example, an angle. I've had some people say, look from X to Y and shoot, but, the wall is pretty big. So, I need some reference points or something in those cases. Obviously, if it's pretty obvious, you probably won't need to do it. But if it's open to interpretation, then please do include a screenshot or be as precise as possible with your wording. And I will do my absolute damnedest to upload it for you. Anyway, that's somewhat off the topic. So anyway, over the next few days I will be uploading some more match videos. I was actually going to do it today, but I've been operating on a really low amount of sleep today. I went out last night to a friend's birthday meal, and I came back pretty late, and then my body just decided not to let me sleep for what have you reason. Not particularly sure why. So anyway, that's by the by, it doesn't really matter. I will be uploading some stuff for you guys, so don't worry about that. And of course I will be keeping up to date with all the beta changes. And when the game launches, I will be one of the first people, hopefully, to buy it. So anyway, with that all said, who knows, maybe I'll even have a specific competition for you guys, depending. Let's see though. Anyway, with all that said, I hope you guys have enjoyed my ramblings. I will be uploading more stuff, as I've already mentioned, so I'll keep you guys up to date. So take care, goodbye, and If this is the first video or what have you, you can feel free to subscribe. Take care.